And just like that, we're live.
Good morning. I feel live.
I feel
The
live.
trees
I feel
outside look
lively.
very live. It's a lovely live morning.
Even though it's just past 9. Just past 9.
Yeah, is it so close past 9 that we should dawdle for a bit, do you think? Or is it
I
past
think
9 enough that we should just launch into?
how are you this morning, my dear?
I'm feeling pretty perky.
You look perky.
Thank you.
And good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful fall morning here in the anarchist jurisdiction of
Ooh,
Cascadia.
ooh, I like that.
I know. Well, it's not my original Trump. I should probably credit Trump.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. We used to be a little Beirut.
No, that was under Bush the older.
That's what I mean. We used to be a little Beirut.
Yeah. We did used to be.
Yep.
Now we're just the anarchist jurisdiction. Okay, well, good morning. And I think now
Should
that
we,
we've spent a couple of minutes,
should we move higher on the screen?
yes, yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Okay.
Tilting the camera.
Yep.
Nice. Teresa's doing some tech assistance this morning, and we appreciate. We have new lighting. We're just moving forward in this world of learning to use our technology.
Yep.
It's only been a couple years.
Yeah, since I started the internet, I agree. These television typewriters are confusing.
They're really the shit, though. I think they're going to catch on.
Yeah, we'll see.
Carry on. And for that crow looked like it was coming in for a land in our room.
He's got something to say.
It got veered off at the last moment there and landed on the roof instead of crashing through our window. That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
All right. Focus.
All right then. This is now Bridge to a Better World, and I'm Teresa Mitchell, and that's Ani Raven Haynes.
Morning.
And this morning, I would like to talk about blowback, intentional, unintentional, but mostly Imperial blowback. And the thing with blowback is it's so common that, I just don't know where to start. And maybe I'll start with some intentional blowback. And that was in the Iran-Contra cocaine era, which was exposed most famously by Gary Webb, the San Jose Mercury.
Yeah.
Was it San Jose Mercury?
Yeah, I think so.
The Mercury, anyway, in California. I'll just be a little vague about it. And he discovered a story after quite a bit of intensive professional journalism. He blown up many a scheme, and was really had made a name for himself as a professional by the time he got on to Freeway Rick and the cocaine. And he was told by various characters in California that the cocaine was coming from the Contras. And when he went to talk to the Contras about it, they said, well, the CIA put us up to it. And of course, you can't just say something like that. You have to document it. So he documented until he had a story. And he put that on the newly internetized website of the San Jose Mercury News, I think is the name of the paper.
It was.
And it spread
that was
like
me
wildfire.
fact checking in real time. Yes.
And it caught the CIA flat-footed. And it started to be seriously discussed, and there were going to be hearings in Congress about it. And then the CIA realized, wait a minute, since the 1950s, we have put our people, or really we've sort of created our people from sycophantic types, columnists, etc., and occasionally journalists, working for the New York Times, Washington Post, Los Angeles Times. I mean, these are long-standing people who had built their careers on those juicy, semi-secret tidbits that the CIA would occasionally leak to them, of course, for the CIA's benefit and for the intention of the political uses of the secret police. And so they got their people to write articles that poo-pooed the whole thing. And they made sure that, through their channels, those newspapers understood that they were going to have hell to pay unless they did that. And they very successfully did it, to the point that Gary Webb, instead of being lauded and given his own department at San Jose Mercury News, was fired. And the blowback part of that is that was a gigantic funnel of cocaine. And you can trace back many now existing organizations in the United States and in Mexico, as a matter of fact, and a fair amount of money that went into Citibank to that effort from the CIA. And what people remember mostly about it is that, it was poo-pooed, it was false. It turned out there was nothing to it, because that's how effective propaganda is in the United States. So maybe I'll start with that one and say that's kind of blowback. And the specific blowback, the intended, I'm sorry to say, blowback is that many brown and black people in the United States are dead, imprisoned, or have their health and their personal power and their family power broken. Worked great.
Because of the racist war on drugs,
Yeah.
and how it plays out to be a social control and not anything to do with public health.
Yep. And, reminds me of Measure 110, which is getting all kinds of pushback from conservatives who just really, really want to see brown and black and leftists once again assaulted and dragged off to jails and beaten and killed by the police because they can find some illicit substance on them, or plant an illicit substance. Let's be real about it.
Well, and also I want to say this about that for Measure 110. We're hearing, when we saw the building that I think is super cool, because I watched it being built in the 70s, and it was a part of the movie Lathe of Heaven, which was a really, really little release of a science fiction book. It was used as the building of the future in Lathe of Heaven. It's the building downtown in Portland, on 5th and Oak or something like it. And we saw news item after news item this summer about how the block has been taken over by junkies, by fentanyl addicts, how it's a free market of drugs, and how the cops can't do anything because of Measure 110. The city's hands are tied. There are properties like this being taken over
I'm a policeman.
by these ruthless junkies that are just having their way with our city, because Measure 110 means, well, that's just what we have to put up with now. When in fact, Measure 110 does nothing of the sort. It decriminalizes personal use, but it does not allow for public drug use and the taking over of city blocks with, I'm going to say some petty gangs and some big gangs, and, often backed by, in our history, don't know in these cases, but often backed by kickbacks to the cops. So carry on. I'm sorry, I digressed on Measure 110.
No, that's excellent. Some gangs wear red, some gangs wear blue. So blowback is, as I was saying, sometimes intentional, often quite sad, sometimes unintentional, apparently. Pardon me. Operation Cyclone would be one in which, that might be mixed. By golly, I'll just burp out this story. Operation Cyclone, according to Wikipedia, was one of the longest and most expensive covert CIA operations ever undertaken. Funding officially began with a mere $695,000 in mid-1979, increased to $20 to $30 million a year in 1980, and to $630 million per year in 1987, the biggest bequest to any third world insurgency. What am I talking about? I'm talking about money to the Mujahideen, to conservative anti-Soviet people in Afghanistan. It says the first CIA weapons were antique British Lee Enfield rifles shipped out in December 1979. They did that because that was close to what people actually had on hand, and minimal training required. It was a step up actually to some of the old shotguns they were using. Excuse me. And by September 86, the program included U.S. origin state-of-the-art weaponry such as the FIM-92 Stinger surface-to-air missiles, some 2,300 of which were ultimately shipped to Afghanistan, and which were very tasty on the international arms market. People just love those. Shoot an airliner right out of the sky, and that is the sort of thing that happened in ensuing years. So that's some blowback. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because the Mujahideen had a lot of people, and the CIA encouraged them to recruit internationally because they needed, warm bodies there in Afghanistan to put their army together and go hide in caves that the Mujahideen knew well. And one of those major source countries was Saudi Arabia, from where we get, guess, Osama bin Laden. And the CIA pushes back really hard on that. Even in Wikipedia, you can tell they've been in there editing because, they'll say just the typical CIA things like there's no evidence of any actual payment from the CIA to Osama bin Laden. Why would there be? He was a rich man. It's like he got involved in this thing that the CIA created. And when I say Blowback, Mujahideen, Osama bin Laden, I am specifically correct. And there's no doubt to it. Because
I love the way you say that. It's because I am correct.
Yeah.
Nanny, nanny, boo boo.
Well, what I'm trying to say is that this isn't a mere theory. That's how they did it. That's how he was recruited. That's what was going on. And they were open about all that. And then they can't go back and say, oh, but, you can't show us the check that we gave to Osama bin Laden. There probably isn't a check they gave to Osama bin Laden. Or maybe there is. It doesn't matter. But and
that really isn't the way that realpolitik, as Marlene Smith would say. It's not really the way that works.
That's not how that works. But the money really, really works. National Endowment for Democracy has been called the National Endowment for Death Squads for many years, and they got their money into the Mujahideen, and they, if you've got a brutal, fascistic group opposed to anything. Anything left of Senator Ted Dead Kennedy, or anything that far left, as a matter of fact, you can count on getting some money from the National Endowment for Democracy. And they, for example, are famously funding the opposition in Venezuela and have for many, many years. They were caught flat-footed and very embarrassed. The first blowback from Venezuela in a big way happened when Hugo Chavez was abducted, taken off by NED paid traders to an island just off Venezuela, which unfortunately for the plotters was easily within helicopter distance. He was helicopter commander. His loyal troops went and fetched him the same day and brought him back, and then the whole thing was exposed. Blowback. It happens a lot to the U.S. And so I just want to kind of establish that this is something that U.S. and U.S.-related political entities have a habit of. And in the case of Afghanistan and its vast mineral wealth, at first it was handy to tweak the Soviets with, but at first, after that, it became clear that it was full of desperately needed rare minerals to the tune of trillions of dollars. And all that's been very convenient for contractors. And I bring that up because the corporations are always involved in this sort of scheme. So moving along on the category of blowback, I also want to mention the Mano Blanca groups, which caused so much trouble and were part of the cocaine pipeline to Freeway Rick, which wrecked the United States. Another part of the blowback there is that all of those countries that were destabilized by the death squads that were paid for by the NED and the CIA and other secretive U.S. Secret police groups, and those countries are still destabilized because how could they not be? The most vicious thugs have been put in power. The most helpful and big-hearted people have been shot to death. And Bob's your uncle. The place is a mess. People are trying to come north. And climate change is making that sort of thing so much worse. Ironically, I don't want to mention that without saying that the U.S. just desperately needs that labor. And it's really silly not to open the borders. Not to mention inhumane.
Inhumane, racist, sure.
Yeah, but Hamas is also a case of blowback.
Excuse me.
Hamas, let's say the Ukrainian S-14 or C-14 group is something that was very convenient for disrupting enemies at one point, and now is out of control. Oh, I can't just mention S-14 without saying who they are. S-14, as you might guess when I talk of Nazis, the 14 refers to the 14 words of white people, yada, yada, white people, families, white, 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 which is very common across the United States. And when you see 14 and 88 in Trump's messages, that's what they're referring to, little code messages.
We used to call them dog whistles, but they're damn loud.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, they're more like dog bullhorns now, but Hamas is blowback, and I want to put that very specific information out because a lot of people immediately say, "Oh, that's a conspiracy theory." Well, it's a conspiracy that is more or less open. Using analystnews.org's write-up on it, I want to give some quotes here from Netanyahu and the gang. General Gershon HaKohen, an associate of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, said in a 2019 TV interview, quote, Netanyahu's strategy is to prevent the option of two states. So he is turning Hamas into his closest partner. Openly, Hamas is an enemy. Covertly, it's an ally. And that means that money has been given and money has been arranged. One of the biggest sources of money that was deliberately arranged by Netanyahu and by his factions in Likud and by Kahanists, who frankly run Israel now. Kahanists used to be arrested for their whatever, for being yahoos, and now it's pretty much policy for them to say that they want to kill all of the Palestinians. That was always the Kahanist way of looking at things. How's that for mild?
Yeah, mild.
They write, Hamas was born during the first Intifada when the Palestinians rose up against their occupiers beginning in 1987. The group was founded by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, a near-blind quadriplegic refugee who grew up in a Gaza refugee camp. And as I mentioned, once Netanyahu realized how useful it was for his plan of preventing the union of Gaza and the West Bank, he and his people did whatever they could to keep that split going, which, there was plenty of resentment between the two groups to start with. But when it came to an election in the 1990s to decide who was going to rule Gaza, the Israeli military and government did everything they could to make sure that the Palestinians chose Hamas because while they didn't allow the vast number of Gaza workers in Jerusalem and elsewhere to vote in the election, they prevented that. And as I said, they arranged funding to Hamas. Their tunnels now are vast and they are well constructed, and this is because they finally had sufficient money. Now, I don't want to exaggerate the money that Hamas has, whereas it is hillbilly rich compared to the rest of Gazans, is diddly compared to the satellite guided, logistically enhanced tanks and guns and submarines, helicopters and jet planes that the Israeli military has. I mean, those rockets, I laughed when they said that Hamas had blown up a hospital with a rocket because the biggest rockets they have don't have that kind of firepower. And just about, I'm going to guess 70% of the rockets that they have are homemade things that literally use a mixture of sugar and fertilizer. You poke a little hole in the middle of the cylinder, it goes, and then you have a little grenade at the end of it, and maybe you'll hit something that you want because it's not guided. It's just a homemade, I shot back sort of weapon. So Hamas is blowback, and I do want to put some more details on that. Hamas, to my great regret, is Israel's creation. That's a Mr. Cohen quoted in Wall Street Journal. A Tunisian-born Jew who worked in Gaza for more than 2 decades. He watched the Islamist movement take shape, muscle aside secular Palestinian rivals, and that would include the once brilliant Palestinian, the PFLP was shoved out because the U.S. especially didn't want any socialists getting in charge of things in Gaza or anywhere else, of course. Instead of trying to curb Gaza's Islamists from the outset, says Mr. Cohen, Israel for years tolerated, in some cases encouraged them as a counterweight to the secular nationalists of the PFLP and the PLO, especially the PLO, because they were worried about the PLO uniting Gaza and the West Bank, and thereby keeping that two-state solution alive. Well, the two-state solution is pretty thoroughly dead. And the blowback of Hamas is in the category of intentional. So doubt it not is what I'm saying here. Now I want to say that this sort of thing is happening in U.S. society right now. For example, if you look at Time magazine, you can see an article by Vera Bergengren that extremists in the U.S., for example, the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, raised more than $6.2 million for their activities on crowdfunding sites. You ever wonder how they suddenly pop up in Hong Kong? You know, how they get money to jet across the country and show up at these little protests? You know, it's like a few dozen people. All of a sudden, they're in the South, they're in the North, they're in the West. How they do this? They have millions of dollars, and it comes from their crowdfunding site, and behind their crowdfunding site are, you know, more Nazis, frankly, in people who have raised their billions by being corporate extractors in the U.S. And also, before I close the subject, I want to say that I'm sorry.
No, I was just corporate extractors from the U.S. funding Nazis. I was just wanting you to elaborate maybe a little bit more,
Elaborate a bit,
or a
okay.
little bit less. I'm not
Vast
sure which.
majority of the funds, $5.4 million, or 86%, were raised on GiveSendGo, a Christian crowdfunding website that has become a singularly important platform of the extremist fundraising ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who, I mean, it's the usual suspects, and it's the same people who fund Trump who give the major donations on that Christian site. That is how they do it. So that dynamic is in place here. I mean, to the point that American police are often, and in the case of Portland police, are often trained by Israeli police. Use Israeli tactics when a Portland cop smashes your face against a lamppost, for example. That's a magkrava technique that they learned from Israelis. Isn't that nice? Putting it all together, you may wonder, since there's obviously to be no two-state solution, since that is actually laughable, although it's convenient for politicians like Biden to say that maybe there could be somehow a two-state solution. There can't. They intend to wipe out the at least the northern half of the West Bank and occupy it. There isn't any other word for it. And if they say they're not going to, well, who's going to? Oh, well, they say, well, it can't be the PLO in the West Bank. And of course, the reason it can't be the PLO in the West Bank, they give the reasons that there's too much resentment. I suppose that there would be, but in any event, that was what they were trying to prevent the whole time. And it is not credible that the Israelis, who literally have a training duplicate of Gaza to go shoot fake people in case of just such a thing as this, who know everyone's phone number and everyone's car license plate and know what everyone's doing at any given time because of their constant surveillance, satellite and drone surveillance, and of course cell phone surveillance, is incredible. It's literally not credible that they didn't know that the murderous rampage on October 7th was going to happen. That had to have been brewing for quite some while. And it's been very convenient for Mr. Netanyahu, who was headed for jail and who is now the heroic head of a country that is desperately defending itself against, and it was the most horrible thing that Hamas could possibly make it. The Netanyahu, the government, many big industrial concerns want to put a canal through that part of the country from the Mediterranean across to the Dead Sea, which is becoming more dead by the minute. It's evaporating, and also water from its tributaries has been cut off. And that should not surprise. In this case, it's not oil. It's water and electrical power. Once they put in the pipes, I don't know if something that gigantic can be called pipes. I guess they aren't literally pipes. They will go downhill from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea and make electricity. And I had that information. Oh, I do have that information The Mediterranean Dead Sea Canal is a proposed project to dig a canal from the Mediterranean Sea to the Dead Sea, taking advantage of the 400-meter difference in water level between the seas. The project could correct the drop in the level of the Dead Sea observed in recent years. The canal could be used to generate hydroelectric power because of a surface difference and maybe they say by salinity gradient power, but they don't have to go that far. This is a Wikipedia article titled Mediterranean Dead Sea Canal, so you can look it up for yourself. The idea was revived during the 1980s for the purpose of power generation following the 1973 oil crisis. So it's been brewing for a while. And those darn pesky brown people have been in the way for quite some time. And my prediction is, mark your calendars, 3 years from now, they'll start breaking ground on that. And they'll have their nice little canal, because all the people who could oppose it will be dead. And that's one of the major pushes. That and just general hatred is pushing the way the Israeli army is acting right now.
And general hatred is really, when you say that, it's very inculcated, it's very nurtured racism.
It is racism. It's not an accident or a coincidence or something that you should look away from, that a whole lot of rich white people are crushing to death a whole lot of very poor brown people.
Yeah. Yowza. Everything you've said is, I agree with.
Yes,
and so where do we go from here? Well, again, it seems a small gesture, but at least one that we can all take today, and that is to call our elected reps and demand a ceasefire now. I have seen the whole idea of having a pause of firing for humanitarian aid to be delivered. And I find that so devastatingly hollow, when you have mass slaughter, when in fact there's genocide being committed on being live streamed, basically. What does it mean in a world that I personally grew up in, knowing that never again, right, would we allow genocide to happen? And yet this is the third or fourth genocide I can name as somebody, in my adulthood. We have already seen an attempt to genocide Rohingya people. We have, seen the attempt or the actual genocide in Rwanda. There have been many situations where people are saying, well, this could turn into, we fear it may be, and very horrendous acts have happened. But here's an ongoing act being live streamed daily, all day, every day, 24/7. It fits the hallmarks of the international test for genocide, as I've gone into the details of in previous episodes. And what can we do? Having a pause for a few hours a day to bring in humanitarian aid so you can then begin killing people again seems hollow, seems, what is the word I am looking for? Cynical. That's the word I'm looking for. It's it seems cynical at best. And it's a dire situation. It breaks my heart that Bernie Sanders has not called for an outright ceasefire, though he is calling for a pause, a humanitarian pause. We need a ceasefire. We need more voices of our elected officials decrying that they will not be a part of the genocide that the U.S. is fully sponsoring, and that Western governments are fully aiding. I was heartened to see the Prime Minister of Belgium calling out this act of genocide and saying that they would no longer participate in it. And I want to see that spreading to other Western European countries. I want to see it spreading to the US. So call. And if there are actions that you can take part in with your conscience and with yourselves, take part in those actions. There's no time like the present. You know, it just, I find it horrifying that this is going on daily, that people have lost every member of their family. entire families don't have any survivors, that this is going on daily. And we can't actually just get a pause. Like, let's look at ceasefire now. We can always go back to killing each other later. Should the ceasefire not work? But we cannot resurrect entire families when suddenly the world goes, oh, this has gone too far. We shouldn't be doing it. And so that's sort of my rationale. Ceasefire now. Let tempers calm. Let information flow past the disinformation that is being really put out there furiously and thickly by the Israeli state, by the U.S. state, by the states of many of the Western countries that are backing this genocide. So that's what I wanted to add to that. We need an immediate pause. We need an immediate ceasefire. We need to save lives today, and that's there's nothing else to say for
I
me.
know. Well, as I've been saying every week, we all need to move swiftly to keep our eyes peeled and our ears pricked to move against racist hatred against Jews here in the United States, against
Absolutely.
Palestinians here in the United States. This is the sort of time when people really decide that they are going to be the agent of stochastic terrorism. Is it stochastic or stochastic?
I think it's stochastic myself.
Stochastic. Okay, so it kind of looks like stochastic. Anyway, this is the time when people will do a massacre. People who just love to pet their guns will be thinking of that sort of thing, and it's up to all of us to catch it, stop it, prevent it. Yeah, there's not much more to say about that.
Yeah.
We don't want any more Dalek ideology.
Yes.
I was going to make him say exterminate.
He only says that actually as he's going along the ground. Yeah, you can't just get him to yell exterminate on command.
Why won't you cooperate?
Yeah, well. So that said, I do have to row. I do. And it kind of, well, let's just say reflects sort of a broader theme. What we have here is the Knight of Cups, the Ten of Wands, and the Ace of Cups. And what this is telling me is that good job, good people, in being guided by your hearts, in using your wisdom, your wise self, your wise hearts to guide you in action and thought and word over this last week. You may have found yourself getting into arguments. You may find yourself going into a talking head song. You may find yourself living in a anyway. You may find yourself having gotten into a lot of arguments, a lot of fighting. There's a lot of tension, as we have been talking about. But letting your wise heart guide you, you've stuck with it, and in fact, you're probably exhausted, and that is really what this card is all about. Having seen yourself through many a battle, seen yourself through many an argument, see yourself through sticking to your own morality, um, advancing your ideas, your heart, that it's it's exhausting, and that's real. And so a couple weeks ago, I did a show solo as Teresa took the week off because this is really hard news to look at.
Yeah, I couldn't do it without choking that week. It's just like,
Well, it's that's what I'm talking about. It's time for self-care. If you're exhausted, acknowledge it and take care of yourself. Um, make those calls to call for the ceasefire, and then do something that will connect you to joy. Read a book for fun. Um, I was talking to my best friend yesterday about my choice of reading materials now. I'm reading a devastatingly sad novel about migrant orphans during the gold rush in California. Yeah, that's cheery. And I thought, well, I could always go back to reading the nonfiction, which is, Ariel Dorfman's book on the Chilean coup in '73 and the ensuing dictatorship of Pinochet. because reading, find a book that's joyful. Right? Find some escapist literature. Find something that is just there to make you smile. And, see a comedy. Walk in the park and kick leaves around. Do what you can do, again, to connect yourself with joy. And that is really around this refresh your spirit. Make sure you're taking time to refresh yourself because we're seeing horrendous.
Yeah, too much is too much.
We're seeing horrendous fucking war
A
crimes,
couple
is
weeks
what we're
ago,
seeing.
I was into what are Pooh and Tigger and Owl up to?
Yeah.
You'd find
Because
out.
100 Acre Wood is a fine place to spend an afternoon with a cup of tea. Um, we know that we're not gonna, put our heads in the sand. We're not gonna go full on ostrich here, but we do need to make sure that we are in this for the long haul. This is not a sprint, it is a marathon. We are working towards social justice for the world, and we need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. And so that's what the cards have to tell us, using your wisdom, your wise heart to guide you in your decisions to take on certain things to advance your just cause, knowing that is right. It is the righteous thing to do, and that you will prevail because righteousness is with you. Your wise heart is working in service to humanity, and that's a great thing. But it does leave you tired in this, world where it's like shouting in the wind, right? Voices in the wilderness. And therefore, please do make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Make sure you are taking care of your heart. Make sure you are drinking from the fountain of refreshment and connecting with those that you love, who appreciate you, who value you, and make sure that you're connecting to joy. And yeah, that's what the cards say. That's what I say.
But if you're an actual cat, don't take that liquor. Don't drink from my cup because I won't notice, and then I'll put the cup to my lip, which happened this week.
Yeah,
You
that was gross.
you can't untaste it.
You cannot.
Just
And
little crumbly bits. at the
with
bottom.
that, we absolutely love you. Thank you so much for joining us this
Yeah.
week. As always,
Thanks for the comments.
please do like this video. It helps in the algorithm of life. We also would love it if you shared it with your friends and family, and we picked up another subscriber or two. That would be fantastic. Thank you for being with us, and we'll be back again next week.
We will.
In the meantime, of course, this is Veterans Day observed, Armistice Day, the day that we want to make sure that there's no more war, the day of peace, and that is 11/11. We call it tomorrow. 11 being one of my favorite numbers. 11/11 is always a fantastic day. Remember to dance. Remember to sing. Remember to find joy. It's 11/11 tomorrow, and
Last
peace,
minute, the last
peace,
hour.
and love are within us. All right.
Our love goes out to you and to all the ships at sea.
Take care, friends.